Thank you. Okay, welcome everybody to the special council meeting to address two items on tonight's agenda about the implementation of differential rates and children's services fees and charges for the next financial year. I want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which the town of Bassendean was founded, so the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and just to acknowledge their ongoing contribution to our town here and to pay our respects to the Whadjuk people. We've just had Paul kindly start the recording, so as usual we're recording and live streaming tonight's meeting. And we've got some new faces tonight, so Paul, who started with us yesterday, is Director of Corporate Services, and we've got Sally here representing Children's Services, and Salvatore, so a number of people have left in the past week and we've got some new faces in, so welcome and thank you for being here. We have no members of the public here this evening, so no public questions. Attendances, apologies and applications for leave. So Councillor Melissa Mikachuk is absent this evening because she's representing the town in Canberra for the National General Assembly. So as councillors are aware, for the first time we had a motion accepted that was proposed by Councillor Hamilton about packaging minimisation reforms. Or sorry, was it by you, Councillor Quinton? No, sorry. And there were 13 local governments that had similar motions and they received very strong support from the Assembly, so they have been carried, so that's great news. So thanks to Melissa for representing us there this week. So item 4, which is the purpose of tonight's special council meeting, 4.1 is the implementation of differential rates. So just before we have any questions, I just wanted to bring the table on page, what page is it? 5 of 9 of the agenda to council's attention. Can I ask that we not refer to this table just because we need to get some more background information on that. So for the purposes of tonight's meeting, we'll just leave that information aside. But other than that, are there questions that councillors would like to ask the staff? Councillor Ganjul.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'm just noticing in the officer recommendation, there's no time frame for what period we'll be advertising this and for what method we'll be advertising the suggested rate differential.
Thank you, Councillor. My understanding is we will be advertising for a period of 21 days, following which time any feedback will be incorporated into a report back to Council for consideration at the July meeting.
Okay, thank you. And I believe in discussions previously we were in fact going to directly write to all affected landholders. Is that?
So that's part of the resolution, Councillor Ganjul?
Not that I can see.
A circular will be sent to all the owners of vacant land.
Have I missed something?
So point 3 says in line with council.
Thank you. Good, thank you.
Yeah. So does that satisfy your?
Yes,
yep.
Yes, it does. So just one last question that I have. So in a situation, I'm just wondering if there's any leniency for a situation where a property may have been assessed as not habitable and therefore is even needed to be brought up to standard or demolished by the town orders. If they demolish because of that, is there a time frame that they will be able to rebuild before being whacked with the different rating, or is that an automatic whack?
Define
Councillor, I'll have to take that question on
thank
notice.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from councillors? Councillor Wilson?
Just to add to the question I noticed that you've got, if there's an effective census date, I guess, at which a determination is made that lot is vacant or not vacant, and the calculation happens if you're able to specify what date that might be.
Circular. That's very peculiar.
So,
yeah, we'll take that on notice. Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
And just a supplemental question, in relation to attachment 1, there's a notice there which specifies a general rate increase. Is this for illustration purposes, or is this us making a decision on the general rate increase
So
at this
that's
point in time.
the 1% that's referenced there?
Yes, the 1% that's referenced in the third paragraph.
My understanding, Councillor Wilson, is that it's merely a proposed increase of 1%.
Thank you. Supplemental. I'm just mindful then that if in the event hypothetically council determines at a later point that it would be say 0.9% or 1.1%, whether there is anything in the wording of the officer recommendation that would be locking us into the words that are in that attachment.
Is it possible, so the actual wording of that, the notice is proposed to go to residents, could a slight adjustment be made so that it's clear that that is a proposed rate rather than it being a little bit ambiguous around?
Yes, and that perhaps alternate wording for point 1 of item 4.1 might reflect that it is 1.99 times whatever the vacant property rate is as determined at some point.
Yeah. Councillor Hamilton?
Further to those questions by Councillor Wilson, can the officers confirm my understanding of the reading of these particulars in the Act is that council does not have to be bound by the advertised rate, that we can vary that when it comes back to council because everything is subject to the consultation period and it can be varied up or down from that. Is that my correct understanding of the details pertaining to the Act?
Councillor Hamilton, that was my impression on reading it as well, although having said that, would need to confirm that to provide definitive advice.
Okay.
So I think the way in which the letter's been set out, it is a proposal that we're putting to the community. So seeking feedback on the proposal, which is the 1%. And I think based upon that feedback, there is the option for movement.
Councillor Hamilton?
So just to further on from that is the fact that this is going out as a proposal, so we're confirming that it's going out as a proposal and that it will come back to council for a final determination. So I'm just checking paragraph 3 again.
I've got a point
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
So can I just clarify, obviously that that attachment's proposed to be sent out to all the property owners who would be affected. I'm imagining that there would be a covering letter as well that would explain how the process would work.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Councillor Gangel, did you want to?
Yes, I would like to pose an additional point 4, that advertising and the opportunity to provide feedback for the proposal be open for a period of 21 days, after which a report will be prepared for council consideration at the ordinary council meeting of July 2019.
So can I just clarify, were we intending to have this at the ordinary council meeting, or was it in terms of timing for the budgeting process?
Thank you. Yes, my understanding is that the paragraph on the final page that talks about providing a report back to council in time for consideration for the July council meeting. So yes, that's what's proposed.
So I think your additional point is really just articulating what
In the resolution.
the intention was. Councillor Hamilton?
Just to clarify, for the benefit of Councillor Gangel, it is statutory, the 21-day advertising period, and in fact the town, correct me if I'm wrong with the officers, the town is going above and beyond what is required by actually contacting each individual householder, that the statutory requirements are just for the 21 days advertising.
That's correct.
Question?
Yes, concern and question. So if we're going to be writing specifically to each of the landholders, would we not have a bias towards their opinion over the rest of the community? How are we advertising to the rest of the community to ensure that there is a balanced response from the community? Because obviously everyone who has a land that gets a letter is going to say no, I assume.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll take it on notice.
Okay. Any further questions? So we've had Councillor Gangel propose at point 4, which essentially is just articulating what the intention already was, so not adding anything particularly controversial. We've also had a proposal to alter the words in point 1.
Yes, Your Worship, although I do not know if we have to specify the actual amount or whether we can specify that it will be 1.95 times whatever amount is determined by council.
Councillor Hamilton has another question.
Can I, just going back on the previous question, there is a commitment to publish a notice in a newspaper circulated within the district, and the notice will include a submission, an invitation for submissions to be made by electors or ratepayers in respect to the proposed rates or minimums. So the consultation is on the proposed rates.
Thank you, Madam CEO. My interest goes to the words in point 1 of the officer recommendation, which says council approves the 2019-20 rate in the dollar, and just inquiring as to whether, if we were to decide on a different amount, if that triggers a rescission motion and potentially does that trigger another need for consultation.
So could we reword it something along the lines of council approves the proposed rate in the dollar for the purposes of advertising? Yeah. We don't actually have a mover for this motion yet though, so we're making amendments without a mover. Councillor Hamilton has moved it. Do we have a seconder? Okay, Councillor Wilson. Now Councillor Hamilton, in terms of these amendments, you're happy with the point 4 that Councillor Gangel has proposed?
Yes.
Yep.
And point 1.
So are you taking note of that? So I think we're saying that council approves the proposed 2019-20 rate in the dollar for the purposes of advertising. Sorry, rate in the dollar and the minimum rates for the purposes of advertising as per the following, and then the table as is written. Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Have you got that?
Yes.
Okay. Did I see another question over there somewhere? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, writing to the affected residents, is that just to inform them, or is that seeking feedback?
Seeking feedback. But
so my next question will be, we get 100% response to say we object to it. What would be our response to that?
so just given the point that councillor...
We've guessed that it's going to be 100%, but we're going to say no, we object to the differential rating. So we're playing a game here, or are we to take notice of those people affected that object?
So can I clarify? I would imagine that when we're seeking feedback, it's not just a object or support. It would be whether there are good reasons that this wouldn't be a sound proposal. Would that?
That's correct, and at the moment we're targeting 3 different categories of land, so commercial, residential and industrial, and it may be that the feedback differs between those different categories, and that's something that council may wish to consider in its deliberations.
Could we also include it on our Your Say so that the broader community has the opportunity? We can advertise it via our website, social media. Are you comfortable with that?
Yes.
Councillor Hamilton?
So, may I ask if we don't have to put that in that it will be included in the Your Say site? Okay, thank you.
Okay. So at the moment we've got a mover with Councillor Hamilton and a seconder with Councillor Wilson with those amendments that we discussed. Does anybody have any further questions? Okay, can we put that to the vote then? All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, everybody. Second item on the agenda is the Children's Services fees and charges. Just noting that myself, Councillor Wilson and Councillor Quinton have children who use this service. Last year we all declared an impartiality interest.
I no longer have any children.
Okay, so sorry Councillor Wilson, you still have children, but not at the Willows. But yes, just for the purposes of transparency. Okay, so we have the proposed increase in fees before us. So $3 a day for the day rate and $15 for a weekly rate, which would then be entitled to the subsidy from the government for about half of that. Do we have questions from councillors? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So a part of the provision of services for the Wind and the Willows program is the maintenance of a reserve account that can cover capital works, and I'm just wondering if this rate would maintain our ability to put aside reserves or whether it would affect it by increasing or reducing.
Thank you, Councillor. Based on last year's figures, it possibly would. However, there are many unforeseen costs in children's services. For example, if educators are away, they have to legally be replaced. So it's not just like you can turn your computer off and not come back to it. So there is, there's usually a buffer, but there's no guarantee.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Worship. A supplemental question. Because we have the opportunity of asking questions while we're being here. In the last budget, we provided a provision for 2 additional staff, but it was hoped we would reduce some of those out of around casual costs, and I was just wondering if you were able to report back on the effect of it, whether it was as intended or
Most definitely that assisted with some of the costing. However, this year we did have 3 people who have transitioned to maternity leave or parental leave during that time. So again, unforeseen costs, there's just never a guarantee, but it's definitely assisted.
Thank you. Other questions?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to, I received an email from the CEO this afternoon that the Wind in the Willow increase is a 1.5 increase, which is the staff salary by the EBA, and there is a requirement for the prescribed staffing level.
So can I just clarify, so the 1.5 is the EBA, it's not an increase in the Wind in the Willows, is that what you're saying?
Yep, so there is a 1.5 salary increase under the EBA, but educators will receive.
Right, and this fee increase covers that 1.5%?
Yep. So this fee increase is a 2.6% increase, so there's just a small margin there.
What's the margin for?
For unforeseens. So for example, last year there was, in the initial costing, the projected for a surplus was $45,000. It's unlikely that that surplus will be met this year. So it really is there is no way of knowing what the costs are. The 2.6% increase, $3 increase, is under the child subsidy cap. So it does mean that all families will still receive their full entitlements, and their out-of-pocket expenses are likely to be under $1.50 per day.
Great, because that's kind of where I was getting at, to ensure that there weren't any extra costs out of pocket for families. Although the childcare subsidy system did change last year, some are better off and some aren't. So
the majority of our families are better off. Traditionally, there would be a lot of families by 3/4 through the year would lose their subsidy and be paying full fees. This year I can report that we've only had 3 families that's affected. So a lot of families are much better off under the new system.
last year when we put the fees up, was there much feedback from families about that increase?
No negative feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you. One last question from me. So the 2.6% increase is to pick up any unforeseen contingencies. If in the event that those funds aren't required, do the surplus funds then go into the reserve for Wind and Willows, or do they get reallocated elsewhere?
So the 2.6% are to cover the 1.5% increase in salary costs. So there's only a 1.1% buffer. Yes, that would then go into reserves.
Yes, but can we just
Can you guarantee that?
into the Wind and the Willow Reserve?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? So we've got an officer recommendation. Is there someone that would like to move that? Councillor Wilson, seconded Councillor Hamilton. Is there anybody against? All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. And that is all we need to deal with for the special council meeting. So closing at 6:55 p.m. Thank you, everybody. So, after the briefing. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much.
So everyone will move straight on to the briefing session. Bring up. Sorry, 6'2". Apologies. 6'2" and 6'10". All right, so just noting that we're on to a different agenda now. Does anyone have any declarations of interest for items on the briefing agenda? No? We have no members of the public here, so we will skip that section. Going on to reports, we have Shana with us this evening for items 6.2 and 6.10. So if councillors are happy, we'll move to those ones first. So 6.2 is the adoption of the Town of Bassendean Dogs Local Law. Is there anything that you wanted to speak to about that, Shana?
We had limited feedback from the public. We had 3 comments, I believe.
Yep, perfect, thank you.
So we had 3 comments received from the public, and we had comments received from the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries. So we took all that into consideration, and it didn't actually end up amending the local law with any drastic changes. It was mainly formatting and just how it's presented, and just to bring it in line with the WALGA model for as drafting principles. There was only a minor addition of a commencement clause, which is literally just an explanation of after 14 days of gazettal, which is what the legislation says, and that was included to bring it in line with our other local laws that are getting reviewed, just to get some consistency. And one comment from the department was in relation to a high penalty for a minor offence, and so we included a clause that would then reduce the ultimate potential penalty for that to also the WALGA preferred penalty.
Thank you. I had a question, not so much related to the law, but to one of the feedback, some of the feedback received, where the person was asking about dog exercise areas. And I note that your comment was that it didn't relate to the law, that it was a council determination.
Yes.
Do you know when the last time we reviewed that was, and whether that's something that is likely to come before council at some stage?
Yes, we are actually considering now all of the parks designations for that. Purely because the last time it was reviewed was when they changed the Dog Act in 2013. So it's about time to look at it again, and potentially consult the community as well, as to find out preference and their opinions, really, because they're the ones that use the reserves.
Great, thank you. Other questions? Okay, we'll stay there for a minute, Shana. We'll do 6.10, was that? So the draft local emergency management committee, is that? That's right. So, page 43. Does anybody have any questions on the minutes of that committee meeting? Councillor Hamilton?
I note in the officer's recommendation that it doesn't refer to one item that was added, which was item 8.1 in the actual local emergency management committee, which was along the lines that the flood markers would be installed before the 30th of June. I'm not sure if other councils are aware that the flood markers have not yet been installed. So that's
So you're flagging that for follow-up, or it needs to be reflected?
Well,
It's not 30.
it's not reflected in the officer's recommendations, so I was curious about how that would translate into action.
Are you able to update us on that at all, Shana, as to where that's at? And
I don't think there is any further update since the actual LIMAC meeting on the 5th of June, other than what's in the minutes of the meeting.
Take that on notice.
So Cia's just said she'll take that on notice and follow it up this week for us in advance of the meeting, next week's meeting. Okay with that? Any other questions on that item? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Worship. Just on the issue of the flood markers, has a final determination been made on the flood levels after the assessment report is done by the MRC?
Yes, I believe all of the height markers and designated heights are actually have been assigned and are identified. It is literally the last stage, just putting the markers up at those points that is outstanding.
Christian's giving us vigorous nods from over here as well, so confirming that it has been finalised. Councillor Hamilton?
Can I confirm that the flood markers are, they've been ready to be installed for some considerable time, but apparently my understanding is that contractors need to be employed now because it was going to be done by SES, was it?
Yes.
And so obviously you have no idea whether contractors have been approached or
No,
quotes?
I believe some investigation has been undertaken and potential items have been raised in relation to that, but I don't know, I can't confirm anything for sure.
Just further to that, if it's the case that we might need to get contractors to survey and install the flood markers, is there an existing budget allocation for that, or is that something we might need to consider as a part of the budget process?
As I understand it, part of the funding is still held over to complete that project. I can't confirm whether or not it is sufficient for that project, but I do understand there is still funding left to cover that.
Brilliant, thank you.
We've exhausted questions. Thank you. Hope your little boy's feeling better. Okay, so back to item 6.1, request for endorsement and public advertising of the draft local integrated transport plan. So this is Mr. Dowling's item. I had a query around, and maybe Dina, you're able to help with this as well. So there's reference in here to how we're intending to advertise this. I'm aware that we're in the process of updating our printed communication, whatever the title of that may be. Is there an intention to include things like this in those publications where there's opportunities for public consultation, or do we need to look at other mechanisms?
Are you referring to our magazine?
Yep.
That's in production. So
the replacement of Bassendean briefings rebranded.
we could certainly use that as a mechanism to bring the community's attention to the fact that this is out for public comment and point them where they can receive a copy of the document.
I get my question was in relation to this, but more general as well, like whether we were intending to use this to bring people's attention to opportunities.
Certainly that's something we can do. Would you like to comment?
I just wanted to advise you that at the moment the Bassendean briefings is going out the 3rd week of July and the deadline is tomorrow.
Okay.
So one of the difficulties is the long lag time.
Yep.
And something might change after we've sent it to the printer. That's all right. Just be aware that there is some time to go. I just need to meet my personal deadline tomorrow.
Okay, I think that comment you've just made has raised some questions around the table. Councillor Gangel?
Yeah, I know it's not on the item, but you know, since it has been raised by yourself, Your Worship.
Yes.
Just wondering, are councillors going to be able to get an inside look into this new, exciting, rebranded Bassendean briefings on recycled paper?
Most definitely. So we actually don't have a prototype to look at yet, but the idea was that we've got Market Force working on a prototype. So the Mayor, myself and our Corporate Communications Coordinator met with them a couple of weeks ago. So they've put together some options for us. We still don't have a title yet. Our Corporate Communications Coordinator has been working very hard in the background, pulling together a number of articles, and they're yet to go through a review cycle yet. So
So-
that's where we're at.
Sorry, just for the 3rd of July, are you distributing it through Australia Post?
Yes.
So,
Sorry, I
the-
think 3rd week of July.
oh, 3rd week, oh, sorry, thank you very much. I was going to say that doesn't work out
So,
for time.
so just to clarify, obviously you have a deadline tomorrow, but
Articles, yep.
It still has to go through a review cycle.
and so there'll be the opportunity for councillors to have a look at what's being proposed.
Yes.
The raw text, perhaps, if not the
Yes.
mock-up?
Yes.
Is that what the flurry of hands was around? Yes. Okay, Councillor Hamilton.
Shouldn't have said anything.
This doesn't relate.
I'm glad I did.
This actually doesn't relate to the item.
No.
But since we're on it, has there been an assessment of costings relating to this, and will we come out better off?
The fact we actually haven't had a Bassendean briefings for
Okay.
a few months, we're already ahead. But one of our discussions was around the regularity. So Bassendean briefings was every 2 months. We've worked it out that perhaps 5 a year would work because of Christmas and January. December, January is usually a fairly quiet time. People are away and so on. So I think overall, I don't think we're looking at a greater expense, but one of the things that we have tried to incorporate in the new mock-up is reflective of this council's commitment to sustainability, a more sustainable product, so something that is recyclable rather than a plasticky coated cardboardy magazine that's difficult to break down, but also a more strategic document as well that's linked more to where we're going rather than just sort of the here and now and the events. So giving the community a bit of a heads up on our aspirations, and also I guess featuring some of our local heroes in our community as well. So once we've got that new prototype, we'll make that available to you, but in the interim we can provide you with the raw text for the first edition.
So just one final comment on this, just to acknowledge that if you are distributing it through Australia Post and the significant handling of the material, plus with weather conditions, be it wet weather with snails or summer with sun and stuff, the material does need to be sturdy enough to actually last to get into people's houses.
Yes.
So, yes.
Yes, thank you. We've replicated it very much based on some of the other local government examples, particularly an example that was given to us from Fremantle, which is, I think, a good product, and I think resonates well with this council.
Councillor Quinton?
Back to the item at hand.
Yes.
The tables in this are extremely hard to read. They're not going out for public consultation like that.
Oh, in attachment.
Yes, we can reformat it before it goes out for public comment, because there is difficulties with reading them, yes.
Extremely hard to read.
I asked that last time.
Yes. Yes, I'm sure that was asked last time, so this is the final product that's going out for consultation. It would be great to have something readable for our community.
Other questions? Councillor Brown?
Thank you. Page 5,
Of the
objective 3.2, enhanced connectivity between places and people. Draw attention to 3.2.4, enhanced road safety through design. I'd like to emphasise probably the need to, in conjunction with this, consider what we're trying to do with improving road safety and increasing our tree canopy rather than the old speed hump design, road safety. Start to look at what we're trying to achieve through road design safety and improving the tree canopy. I like that noted, thanks.
other questions? Tony, I just had one question for you. I haven't gone over the document again in detail since it was last presented to us, but I know that you asked for feedback from councillors, and I'm not sure whether others did, but I know I provided some feedback. What has happened with that feedback? Is it incorporated into this document, or how's that going to be dealt with?
Yes, all that feedback was incorporated into the document. I've actually got to draw your attention. There's one more minor change that needs to be made. In Chapter 6 there's a table of implementations, and the proposals RN1 and RN2 referenced in there need to be modified to match the one in Table 2 in the long list, which is in Chapter 4 of the draft
I'm going to
plan.
have to take your word for that, but you've... Okay.
It's just to make it more consistent with the wording.
Okay.
Yeah, and we'll do that before it goes out for advertising.
Okay, thank you. How's it
So,
going?
yeah, if I could, I'm not sure. I noticed that in one of the tables we had a recommendation to lower speed limit in the residential areas to 40 kilometres throughout the town. It was in one of the tables here.
But you can't read.
Here we are. It says, consider basis for reducing speed limit, in town centre, and on local roads to a maximum of 40 kilometres. I was just wondering, just with the proposed changes to Lord Street and Walter Road East, would that also be looked at as a reduction in speed from the 60 kilometres that we've currently got there?
Page you on, John?
I'm on page 17 of the attachment, and it's RN10.
So, Mr. Dowling?
Yeah, I'd have to take that one on notice because
Thank you.
I don't know the answer.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, so then we'll move on to 6.3, which is the installation of manual and retractable bollards. Councillor Gangel, I'm sure you've got some questions.
Yes, thank you. Who am I addressing my questions to?
Not really sure. Do you want to... Oh, sorry.
Hello, very good. Okay, so let me just, is this the bollard one? I think so. So,
Really bright. Can you come with me?
okay, just with the attachment, I notice how you've done the area is literally the stretch from Old Perth Road to James Street. It's problematic closing off Wilson Street. I'm not sure if you've looked at road traffic management, that if you actually close off Wilson Street as you propose, because you're effectively closing off Wilson Street from Guildford Road, because cars will not be able to turn down into Wilson Street because there's no other direction for them to go. So you'd actually have to detour them from Guildford Road, which would be problematic. But if I could, I'll just come and show you. So what I'm wondering, I understand how you've done like the first section with Old Perth Road to Wilson Street. With that's how the markets are. So I understand that. Now, closing off Wilson Street here, I'll suggest that's not a good idea because the track, you need that because that's a major connector route. So you actually close it off again from here to here. So that's the recommended changes that I would. You don't not to close off Wilson Street. That is problematic in that way. And so I suppose the overall question, and thank you for the report, and I note that obviously there's not a considerable amount of cost saving, if any, I've noticed in the report, to traffic management. But because I know when I've been involved with Little Italy and Wonderrealm, when you just have a signage that says road closed, I'm assuming the bollards will be a lot stronger in preventing cars from turning, because a lot of the time you have them from Wilson Street already turning in, and they're actually trying to reverse because they've sort of not realised that the road's closed. So would the bollards actually be a stronger reinforcement of closing the street?
Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor. Yeah, they should be. Yes.
Wonderful. I think that's...
Councillor
They should be
Hamilton?
crash bollards.
Oh, fantastic. I love that. Thank you.
Just having a look at your
Australia Day on Old Perth Road now.
little map in the attachments there.
Yep.
I'm just curious, I mean, you've got obviously the red marking where you propose to put the bollards. So I'm just curious, what's the advantage of putting 3 bollards there?
You look at the James Street end?
Yeah, instead of just putting one at the end before you cross into James
So
Street.
on Old Perth Road?
Yeah.
Do you
It
understand which?
just seems to me like you're not gaining any much.
You actually are.
See, just
No, I know exactly what you're saying. You actually...
so if you had
you actually... oh, sorry. You actually are, because for Wonder Realm, we actually use that as a piazza area, like a round circular area for the food trucks and stuff to go into. And we had the water feature and stuff there.
You don't need one up here though.
No, because that's right. You don't need actually
Is it
across
so
James
dead
Street.
end
Yes, yeah, that's correct. Yes, that one is.
so
yeah.
that comes out.
Yes.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Worship. Just in relation to officer recommendation, item 6.32, where it says, it be noted that officers recommend that bollards not be installed in Old Perth Road from Guildford Road to James Street, which is the, as I understand it, the second portion where currently we have the Wonder Realm.
No, he's talking
It's
about
the
the
whole
lot.
length.
It's the whole.
It's
The
saying
whole
that we
lot.
don't do the project at all. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We understood the project was to save traffic management costs for closing for the whatever events we have in Old Perth Road, and through the assessment we're recommending that there's no, well, through the assessment we've finalised that there's no real cost saving, so we're not recommending to do it.
And is that on the basis that currently our costs are limited to some minor contributions to the men's shed?
The analysis showed that we would still need the same amount of traffic management. So there is $500 that we give to the men's shed, but there's also additional traffic management costs we need to expend. So the 37,000, we don't think it's an efficient use of funds.
Okay, so if you could just unpack that a little bit more for me, saying that even if the bollards are there, we're still required to have traffic management?
Yeah, that's the essence of the report, if that didn't come through clear enough. We still need to have the signage, reduce speed, prepare to stop, slow the traffic down to 40, and have the traffic controllers, because physical barriers just don't meet the road traffic code. You need to sign it, you need to do the traffic management plans, and you need to have staff, traffic management staff on hand to manage the traffic, manage the pedestrians, manage the people.
And you said also to be able to remove the barriers in the event that an emergency vehicle needs to access as well?
Yeah, you need to allow for emergency vehicles, police, fire, ambulance, to get through in any traffic management event.
Councillor Quinton?
Well, I just wanted to ask how much we do spend on an annual basis to the men's shed for traffic management.
I don't have those figures, but I can get
It
those.
depends on the number of events that we do to close the road, because in addition to the markets, it would, for example, the couple that we had late last year for the Christmas party and so on, they would have been additional costs. Yeah.
Normally the rate that they charge is $500, so with that global 6K for water walk, we use the men's shed to close the road, it was $500.
But we would still need to pay that money in addition to what we're spending on the bollards. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and plus the traffic management plans and.
Councillor Gangel?
Yes,
Sorry,
thank
and
you.
Councillor Hamilton.
Oh, no, Councillor Hamilton, you go.
Okay, I have driven down Guildford Road when the events have been on. So you're saying that those signages that I see, which are slow down, event in progress, all those traffic management bits and pieces will still have to be put in place even if we do have the bollards?
That's correct.
Okay, right.
Can I ask, I know when we were looking at the proposed budget, one of the items in the vibrancy framework was about potentially looking at some changes to that end of Alperth Road heading towards Guildford Road for the following financial year. If we were to install these bollards, would that impact on, or would the paving that we're proposing to do impact on the bollards?
If you close the road,
Yeah.
then that's a different scenario. So if you close the road permanently,
No, I'm not talking about closing it permanently, I'm talking about making it, single level.
no. The at-grade nude street
Yeah.
version, no.
Councillor Hamilton?
I'm glad you brought that up because it occurs to me that perhaps it might be preferable to do the, I forgot what it's called. The
Pedestrian first zone.
Yes. I mean, I know that we haven't yet proceeded to that point, but if we are going to do that, would it not be preferable to look at the whole thing holistically in its entirety before you decide to put in something like the bollards?
Yeah, I agree. So we've proposed 50 grand to do the pedestrian first or the nude street version to design that next financial year. So, and I believe that that's a main driver for this is to make it level, to get rid of trip hazards, to make it more amenable for events and pedestrians. And
Oh no, Councillor Brown first.
but I am still forming it's still early days, so I'm still trying to get across all the objectives.
Thank you. Did you say there were crash barriers, crash bollards?
To protect the crowd.
Yeah, they need to be designed as crash bollards, yeah.
So they're designed to stop aggressive vehicle entry?
They should be, yeah.
Passive, my understanding is they're to stop passive vehicle entry.
Okay.
In which case cones would be sufficient to stop
Well,
passive vehicle entry. If it's aggressive vehicle entry, I can understand why you have crash bollards, but I don't think we've reached that stage yet where we need to. We may do. It may be a risk that we need to identify and deal with, but I just can't see the need for aggressive crash bollards.
the current treatment is it's just plastic cones and plastic barriers.
And that's effective at stopping passive vehicle access, together with your $500 men's shed people.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I may need to retract that comment. My assumption was it should be
designed
as crash, but maybe it's what we've designed here is not. It's
probably
passive.
Could we just get some clarification on that for next
Yeah,
week? That would be great.
I can't see the need for crash barriers unless we're trying to stop aggressive vehicle access.
Yeah.
If that's the case, it's essentially a counter-terrorism move, or to stop violence. Otherwise, a cone placed there has the same effect.
No,
that's essentially
it doesn't.
Hold on, can we just let Phil answer?
That's I suppose what we're trying to say in the report is that currently we put cones down and plastic barriers, probably water-filled, I would suggest. But putting the bollards in doesn't change the effect that we need to have the traffic control. So we have the plastic cones, we have the plastic barriers, we have the traffic control, prepare the slots, slow to 40, etc., event ahead. That still has so we're not changing anything by installing the bollard. So my understanding is we got asked if we install bollards, would that reduce the traffic control requirements, and the answer is no.
Well, Yeah, thank you.
So Councillor Gale, you obviously had something else that you wanted to add that you thought differently? Because I think this was your motion that you moved.
Yes, so just with Councillor Brown, in relation to a witch's hat doesn't prevent a vehicle from entering the area. The bollards actually will. So what having done the events on Old Perth Road, the actual signage that you use that says road closed, they very much get damaged quite easily with cars banging into them as they're wanting to turn the corner, not realising the event's closed, and the actual legs of it can actually get bent and what have you, whereas the bollards will actually be a barrier. They'll actually prevent, there'll be more damage done to the car hitting a bollard than what it would be if a car turned the corner and didn't see the witch's hat or the current signage that we use. But I won't go into debate, but just to state the overall intention of the motion, which I'll debate next week. But the overall intention was to create much more of a piazza type area, hence the festoon lighting in the grassed area, and then being able to have the bollards that will be able to close the area off to make it very much people friendly, and to actually have the barriers as a physical barrier rather than witches' hats or the traffic signage as such stating road closed. It's actually much more of a physical barrier in turning the area into a more pedestrian, event-friendly space.
Okay. Question?
Yes, so taking on board and at face value your advice about it not reducing traffic management costs, with the caveat here that maybe some of the road closed signs might not be required, should hypothetically council agree to this recommendation. Would there be any other aesthetic value in having bollards rather than the large gaudy closed signs that we have now?
I suppose my opinion is that we would still require all of that signage in the attachment. So from that perspective, the aesthetic value would be minimal. I think it's a difficult. I think we're choosing a difficult spot to try and create a piazza near Guildford Road and so many other roads coming in. Maybe I should continue that.
Sorry,
I have created it.
I think Councillor Gage was referring to the piazza in this section in
Very
front
well,
of the
very
council.
correct. Yes, where the festoon lighting
Yes.
is.
And
Yes.
the bollards down the other end is more just
The
extension of
bollards
the
are down that end. I don't know if we have a fascination with that end, but the piazza is very much up the front here.
Okay. All right. Any further questions? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. One last question on this item. I'm unaware of what the costs are for hiring all of this signage. Is it possible, maybe prior to the council meeting, to give us an understanding of what we're currently spending to hire the signage as against possibly purchasing signage that might, I don't know, for example, live at the men's shed, and whether that might pay for itself over a relatively short period of time?
Councillor Hamilton.
Is Councillor Wilson talking about the
The
traffic
road closure
management
signage, yeah.
Yes.
It's $500.
No,
That's each month for the Old Perth Markets traffic management.
So thank you, Councillor Hamilton. I understand that's what we provide to the men's shed for their part of it, but separately and additionally, the actual physical signs that get brought in and installed and then removed.
Sorry.
Yeah.
That's okay.
So.
My understanding is that the town purchased the trailer and the signage for the men's shed to use, so we own those signs and they're stationed at the depot. And men's shed collected every week when they need to use it. And
Great,
go and
thank you.
install it.
That's really helpful, thank you.
Sorry,
Councillor Gadget?
yes, I'd just like to make yet another point. My notice of motion...
It's a
that
question though, isn't it?
Actually, it is because I do note in the report it says here about cost saving, but the notice of motion that was actually moved and supported by council is actually that council receives a report on the cost of installing below-ground bollards on the intersections of Old Perth Road from Guildford Road to James Street. So it was actually just about the cost of actually implementing the bollards, not savings. So I just wanted to highlight that. That's mentioned in the report. Thank you.
All right, has everyone exhausted their questions? Thank you very much. 6.4, the bus shelter installation opportunity. So looking at Penzance Street, James Street and Devon Road. You remember that this was an item that was in the proposed budget last night that we said we would have some discussion around this evening. Did you want to speak to this?
Yeah, I'll give a quick introduction. I suppose the purpose of this report was to address 3 bus stops that we're looking at installing shelters. Devon Avenue, Penzance Street and James Street. James Street is quite straightforward in that from the information we've got from the community, and that's the motion that we're putting up, that it's quite straightforward and asking council to consider installing the shelter, whereas Devon Road and Penzance Street's a little bit more contentious, and we're proposing that we go out to seek some community feedback on those 2.
You just made the comment about Devon Road being straightforward, but I noted in the report it says that residents there have requested that it not be reinstalled.
Oh, sorry, I meant the one out at the front of
James Street?
James Street.
Oh, okay, great.
Sorry, go ahead.
So I had a question around, there's obviously a discrepancy in the pricing here. So the Penzance one, the state government's saying that they can give us 100% of the funding, whereas the James Street one, they're only offering us 50%. I'm wondering why there's a discrepancy and what they're willing to fund.
I'm sorry, but that's just the information I've got from the
And
DOT.
my other question was, the one on Devon Road that is subject to an insurance claim, I think you were saying last night that's already been produced, like the new bus shelter. If the residents of that street aren't wanting that bus stop, is there an opportunity for us to place that bus stop maybe at Penzance Street and then use the 100% funding for James Street so that it's cost neutral for us?
That's something we could look at. I did check with the Devon Road is the insurance claim?
Yeah,
So
but it says there's only one passenger per day there as well.
I've checked with the insurance company. They're happy for us to move that bus stop elsewhere.
Okay, great. So that is potentially, we could
Yeah,
rejig things.
we could. Yeah.
Okay. Other questions? Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Hamilton.
So just in relation to the proposed shelters, the JSG Mini, is how visually permeable is the panel that would make up the backrest?
I believe, I haven't seen them personally, but I thought the photo gives a pretty good representation.
Attachment.
That it is permeable. I think it's like it appears a bit like a mesh, so you can see through it.
So my understanding is that some of the concerns residents sometimes have is that bus shelters can attract antisocial behaviours. So if we could just get some confirmation about how visually permeable it is, just so that we can communicate that as a part of our information strategy.
Yep.
Councillor Hamilton?
My curiosity was with James Street, why we're being asked to fund 50% of that, given that it was removed by the Department of Transport. I do concede that the Mayor's idea about shifting around the funding is quite good, but I'm at a loss to understand the logic, and I agree that I'd like a bit more information on that, because it seems illogical.
Around the funding model, do you mean?
Yeah.
I suspect, because there's been a lot of pressure around these bus stops for quite some time with our local member and also for the Minister, that this is as a result of that public pressure. Would you agree?
I agree.
Yeah, because it doesn't fit their model for funding bus shelters, because it doesn't meet the usage requirements, which is one of the reasons why I'm thinking the Devon Road one is interesting, because it only has one one passenger. Other questions?
Yes. Can I confirm then, is the Devon Road bus shelter the one that did have a weatherproof shelter and was removed by the state government as a part of disability access compliance?
I think there was all disability access, all of them had disability access compliance issues, so they were removed, I think, on that basis, and the concrete and the paving was improved around it to make it disability access compliant.
So, just to clarify though, the Devon Road one, it says it was only removed late last year after the damage from a vehicle, so I think that one was a separate, a different situation. Yeah.
What I'm mindful of is that if we go through the process of installing bus stops, I don't want to miss out a location, and I can't for the life of me remember now the location of the one that was raised by a ratepayer, but I think it was north of the train tracks.
Oh, Walter Road, maybe. Walter Road and Lord Street, near there.
Yeah. Are we able to do a search maybe through the system just to see if there are any other bus stops that were removed in the past 2 or 3 years and see if there's potential for those to be included in consideration for this? And
So as in consideration for us to fund or to get state funding for?
or consideration to enter into discussion with the state about their willingness to contribute to funding.
Councillor Quinton?
Are we locked into this design,
Is this the narrow design?
this JSG Mini?
Yeah.
The small one,
Yeah.
I think so. Yep.
So just to clarify,
They,
no, you go, I just wasn't sure whether you knew the long history of this.
I don't know the long history, but they have a range that we can choose from, and this is a smaller size that fits that space. So I don't think we can install a larger one.
That's been one of the reasons why there hasn't been any action on this, because the residents of Hyde Retirement have been bringing this up repeatedly with various, us, Dave Kelly and others. And one of the reasons that something hasn't been able to be installed is because previously there wasn't a model that the PTA had that fitted in that space, and this is a new model that can fit in that location. So that's my understanding of why now there's an option available.
Okay, but is there the ability to have it weatherproofed on the sides so that you're not getting rained on?
No.
I think the weatherproofing then makes it not that permeable to see through. I think that's the result.
The reason I ask is because there are some amazing bus shelters up at Alkimos, and they are incredible. They're pieces of artwork, actually, and they have carved artwork into it so you can see straight through it. They're extremely permeable and they're beautiful. This is really ugly, and if we're going to have an opportunity to beautify our streets, can we go out and have a look for something that's really nice? I'm happy to send you the images of the ones that I've seen up at Alkimos. They're enormous, they're huge, but the way that they've carved into the metal is really beautiful.
Thanks.
Okay, happy to move on? Thank you, Phil. So 6.5, the proposed car parking facility at Ashfield train station. I noted that in the report there was a reference on page 12 and 13, so not actually in the officer's report but in the attachment, that makes reference to our street tree master plan as how decisions are being made about which trees will be planted in this location. I'd just like to flag that that is no longer our guiding document, and that the trees that are also referenced in this report, so particularly the Callistemon Kings Park Special Bottle Brush, are not species that the town has endorsed as our preferred species. So it's great that the officers are presenting options that are more reflective of council's desire, but I just wanted to flag that they were not no longer part of our preferred tree species. Christian, are you the person that's answering questions about this? I just had a question. So Alex has included 2 designs there. So there's the revised drawing, obviously with more landscaping than what is included in the picture, I'm assuming. It's just a rejig. But then the alternative design, which I thought was really worth looking at, it only shows what looks like half the length of the car park. Would it go the whole length as per the original plan?
Absolutely. That's the second drawing is just indicatively showing the arrangement based on the different angles. But that would run the entire length.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Thank you. Other questions?
No trees in that second photo.
I think that was what you say was indicative and you described. Yeah.
Thank you. Through the chair, the report details that in the sawtooth cut out at the end of the bays in that alternative design, that's the location where the trees could be planted, but not shown on that indicative layout.
Thank you. Are there other questions?
Yes.
Councillor Gangel, then Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, because this will be a point of contention with PTA. Do we have an idea of what the cost differential will be to PTA's model compared to our suggested models? Because obviously they'll say, oh, we've only got X amount of money, and you're going to make us spend that amount of money, and we don't have that. Do we know if there's much of a difference? Because that will be a sticky point with them, believe you me.
Thank you. Through the chair, we haven't costed the difference. We've simply drawn up the alternative. The alternative would be more expensive because it does cause the car park to extend in length, but we haven't done a cost comparison.
So Councillor Gangel, the CEO, just had a point to make on this as well. Thanks.
So my understanding is in terms of the funding model underpinning the upgrade of Metronet Bayswater is a value capture methodology using like a development contribution plan, so offsetting the costs of Metronet Bayswater, which incorporates obviously the overflow car park at Ashfield and also Meltham, looking at passing on that cost to new development in the area. So does that make sense?
No, you.
Okay. So the state government has proposed through Metronet upgrades that the value capture derived as a result of the new Metronet stations will be recouped largely through passing on the cost of the Metronet to new development in the area through a development
but except that doesn't apply to us because we don't have any of the projects here. We're just getting a tarmac. We're getting the offshoot saying this is the little pocket of money that we've got for you. We're not getting any of those additional offset benefits.
So this is part of the Bayswater Metronet project. Ashfield, so it is the project manager for Bayswater Metronet that is managing the Ashfield car park.
This is to replace those parking.
So of the 3 car parks in Bayswater, 2 will be shut down.
Yes.
And this is an alternative car park for people that live in and around Bayswater.
No, I'm well aware of that, but my point is that they would have been allocated X dollars for a car park. It would not be, we're going to allocate above and beyond to give a lush car park. So I'm just flagging that I very much support the alternative designs, but I guarantee you there will be a sticking point with the PTA that they've only got X money for it.
Councillor Quinton.
The Ashfield train station footbridge is still non-compliant with disability access, that's correct?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
So what are their plans to fix it, given that they're directing more cars and people to that train station?
Through the chair, we've touched on that in discussions, and the footbridge is intended to remain untouched as part of this project.
Councillor Hamilton and then Councillor Wilson. And then Councillor Brown.
May I ask if PTA are equally concerned about protecting the supports of the footbridge on that side of the train line as opposed to Guildford Road?
I think that was a...
No, I want to know the answer. Can you ask them?
Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I did notice yesterday, Your Worship, as I was driving along Guildford Road, that they have installed the 3 bollards around the footprint
last week.
of the uprights for the bridge, thus meaning that the entire discussion about removing 4 trees was never necessary. But anyway, I digress. Of the parking bays that have been suggested to benefit the residents of Bayswater in our town, are any of those parking bays going to be allocated for disabled parking?
Yes, that was going to be my question.
can't get up the
Through the chair,
ramp.
yes, there are 2 disabled bays that were incorporated in the design.
You're kidding!
And is it the officers that you're in discussions with the intention that the people who might have wheelchairs that are accessing the train station would then have to get up the non-disability compliant access ramp?
Through the chair, as previously mentioned, the footbridge has been discussed and the response is that there is no intention to alter that as part of this project.
Councillor Quinton, hold on, sorry, Councillor Brown's been waiting patiently and then we'll come back to
Okay,
hear your...
just on this last point, can we make a very strong point back to the PTA about the ridiculousness of this situation?
We can include it in our motion next week.
Yes, can we have something to say that we, the town of Bassendean, find that until you fix that bridge, it is absolutely ridiculous that you would even bother putting in disability parking bays. We strongly advocate for this bridge to be fixed ASAP for our community to use this train station that is now going to be an all-stop station. This needs to become one of the things that we start advocating for our people with disability in this community.
I look forward to your amendment for this motion next week, Councillor Quinton. Councillor Brown.
Thank you. I note the bollards are in place too, and without council intervention, those 4 trees would be gone. No doubt, so it's the power of local government. Standing up to bureaucrats who think they know everything. My only reference is the car park at Bassendean railway station. Did we have any input into the development of that tarmac car park and the ratio of trees? So I'm looking for a reference here for...
Through the chair, the town did have a similar involvement with that application as it's having with this application. It was able to make a recommendation but was not the approving authority.
At the end of the day's end, they can impose their design on us because it's not our land, no matter what we say. That's why I was looking for the reference with the town of the Bassendean railway station car park. The history of that is likely to be repeated. That's because it is a MetroNet government priority.
Through the chair, a very similar process. The town recommends, the state government determines.
Can I just ask a question? Is there any provision for bike parking at Ashfield train station at the moment?
Through the chair, I'd have to take that on notice. We certainly did, at the very early stages, have discussions about a bike shelter.
So I think from memory there's 3 little green shelter things.
Yes, we did have discussions about an actual bike, a secure bike compound being incorporated into the project. And early on we were told that that was likely to be accommodated and incorporated into the proposal. That did fall out, and we were told that fell out because of funding reasons. And I think, as Councillor Evangel has said, there is a small number of individual bike lockers at the Ashfield station.
On the Guildford Road side?
No, the other side.
As in the north side?
Yes.
Away from the PSP?
Yeah. They wanted to save trees, so they didn't put them on the Guildford Road side.
Any other questions on this one? No. Thanks, Christian. Okay, so 6.6, the update on the community of interest groups.
This is an annoying question, and the person that I need to ask isn't here. Maybe I'll ask you, Peter. Why are we calling them interest groups? What happened to working groups? What is the difference?
So part of it is allowing for the asset mapping workshop to occur, because I actually think that will dictate where we take some of these projects. So that will be a bit of a discovery process, but also once we've actually established and I guess mapped our assets, where do we actually want to take this? So that's part of the discussion. So yes, we can have working groups if we want to sort of continue to have regular meetings, but part of this is a bit of a discovery process because there are some unknowns, and by bringing these groups together, and one of the underlying, I guess, themes is social inclusion, bringing them together, finding out the strengths in our society, and then where do we want to take it? There might be some projects that morph out of that asset mapping. So it's, I guess, remaining open-minded to see where it takes us.
I don't remember a decision being made to change it from a community of interest rather than a working group, because the whole intention was a working group for them to have a project to work on from the very beginning. That was the entire intention, and I don't remember being involved in a decision about changing it to a community of interest group.
I think that discussion occurred some months ago when the idea of asset mapping was proposed, and the idea was not to have another committee, but rather let's work out what we're trying to achieve first, invest in the asset mapping, and then make a decision. So I recall there was a paper some months ago that was submitted to council about the proposal for the asset mapping.
Okay, thank you.
You can follow that up if you like. Sarah.
No, don't worry.
Is everyone else happy? Okay, 6.7, methods of community engagement for Palmerston Square and Pabry Way Reserve. I think we had a little bit of a conversation around this last night at our budget workshop, and this report references the budget being for a master plan, but I think last night we had a general consensus that we were actually looking at using the money to deliver something rather than the actual planning process. I just had a question. There's a reference in here about defining the scope, and I'm just wondering if there's any thoughts on how we will do that. One of my concerns being that if we go and making sure that when we're asking the community that we're not creating expectations that we're not able to deliver on.
Yeah, sure. Look, the CEO spoke to me about this afternoon about reallocating those funds for a consultant to actually installing equipment or upgrading the amenity in those parks. I suppose in terms of scope, we need to flesh that out a bit, but we can do that internally in terms of the communication methods. And I suppose it's very much a neighbourhood type. You know, the scope would be more or less restricted to the neighbourhood. Although, you know, looking at some options for the mix of engagement methods, we'd probably do some general media on both projects.
Sorry, I don't think it was very clear. I mean more when we're saying to the community, what would you like? Sure. Just making sure that we're not sort of saying, you can do this, when really what we're talking about is $10,000 or, so just making sure, because I'm just aware from various other groups that we've been involved with, we haven't necessarily at the beginning of the process been really clear about what the end point is going to be, and they've sort of gone off in directions that haven't been the initial intention. So it was more like flagging that I'd be really keen to make sure that when we do go to the community through these various forms, that it is well defined, like obviously giving room for creativity, but not we're trying to do this when it's actually this.
And through the chair, I mean, one way to help define that scope is that we have this reserve classification hierarchy, how we classify public open space, and the community facility was an order of needs assessment identified, classified those, spaces as neighbourhood spaces. So, it sort of defines it as, and it's included in the report as open space, playgroups, meeting spaces, supports local networks and community cohesion. So we can use a bit of that to sort of, either scope out our questions, or when we're thinking it could be a letterbox drop in the neighbourhood, so you might have a community barbecue, and you can really just, start to clarify. So we're looking at maybe a barbecue, swing here, or a little gazebo.
Great. Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Your Worship. This has taken a few twists and turns to get here, and it stems from a motion I moved some time ago. And I notice some of the suggestions about how community engagement and communication might work. So I note here that in the officer comment it talks about having a station, where was it? Installed in the foyer of Old Perth Road. I was wondering if any thought was given to having a station actually in Palmerston Square, so that when people are there, they can see the sign, which I think was in the original motion. So we'd like to engage in a conversation with you about how you would like to see this space develop, and maybe have a box where people could put notes while they're there rather than having to go to a different location.
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor Wilson. We can do that. Make it very local. Something at both Padbury and Palmerston Square Reserve. And we're fortunate we have a corporate communications coordinator now, so something that we'll be engaging with the Dean to work out the best method to do that. But definitely we can do that in each of the parks.
Thank you.
Councillor Hamilton?
This came out of the Asset Committee, and you're right, it has taken a few twists and turns and it has taken a while, so I'm trying to remember. But I do believe the genesis of this was that we just wanted to actually scope some ideas and then do letterbox drops to the neighbouring residents to get their opinions. And so somehow or other it seems to have turned into...
And have a sign on site.
And have, well, yes, fine, okay.
That's what the original motion said.
It seemed to be very different from what was originally proposed in many ways, like master plans and words like that start appearing. So I'm just curious about.
Yes, sure. I think originally, because the notion was to have a consultant, like a recreation planning consultant, come on board to help with the engagement. But I think, as you explained from last night, the preference is not to use those funds for a consultant, but for installation of equipment or amenity. So we don't have to refer to it as a master plan. We can just refer to it as, just a community engagement process to
enhance,
to determine how we, deck out that space, that community space. So we can, if that's a concern, the language, we can not use the word master plan and use a different.
Yeah, absolutely a concern, because we seem to go from, well, pardon me, but as the Mayor has indicated, I don't want to go from a simple to gold-plated.
Yes.
And this is, we've experienced that in the past. So.
One of the conversations that Selva and I had this afternoon was reframing the paper for next week's OCM. So removing any reference to a consultant. We have engineers on hand, we have community engagement on hand, we have community development on hand. And this is about us doing a grassroots project with the community. It's about community development. It's about a budget setting of $10,000 per park, and it's allowing the people the freedom to come up with something that is befitting of their neighbourhood. So we'll remove the reference to the consultant, remove the reference to the master plan. Focus will be on local community engagement.
Great, thank you.
I also, and correct me if I'm wrong, other members of the Asset Committee, but I seem to recall there was also in the early days perhaps some desire to have community involvement in whatever we do in the park. So that was another aspect of it which has evaporated.
So just on that point, I'm not sure how recently you've had conversations with either Eden Hill Community Action Network or Old Perth Road Collective, but just in the last couple of days I've touched base with both of them, and the Eden Hill group was saying that although they're really keen on the project, they don't feel like they've got the capacity to sort of lead it, so it'd be great to have them involved, whereas Old Perth Road Collective I think is really enthusiastic. So, all right, question?
And just to add too that some of the initial thinking that was in the original motion picked up on the different demographics between both spaces. So Palmerston Park is very heavily used by people with young children and babies, whereas the other space, there might be opportunities for more adult or even seniors focused recreational facilities.
Okay, so we've dealt with 6.8 in the special council meeting. So 6.9 is the One Planet Living proposal, which I am very enthusiastic about. Any questions on this item?
So just in relation to item 6.6, where there was discussions about communities of interest groups, I was just wondering if council was to go down the path of the One Planet Living model, whether there might be a need to reframe that to fit into the objectives of the One Planet Living model. So it might be, say, subsets of the health and happiness.
Definitely.
That's a good thought.
Yeah.
Call our newsletter One Town.
So I think part of going into the One Planet process is doing a bit of a stock take of all of our current activities, projects, etc. And it's an opportunity to do a bit of a reset. So with the new visioning document as well coming through from Creating Communities, the opportunity to really rethink, I guess, our strategic outlook and direction, strategic plan.
Can I ask, will our new newsletter be that colourful?
Yes. Is that all right with you?
This has been the inspiration for our magazine.
There will be pretty pictures, John, we promise. Okay, 6.10, we've done that, sorry. So 6.11, Design Bassendean Reference Group meeting. Okay, so 6.12, Audit and Governance Committee meeting.
Sorry, I have another question about the One Planet Living. This says it's $10,000 for the first year and $8,000, but that's not in the... There's only the full day training for 16 people, but there isn't the framework subscription mentioned. Am I reading this wrong?
So you're looking under financial considerations? Is that where you're looking?
Yeah. So this says the first year subscription is $9,500 and the second year is $8,500. Do we not have to pay that? To be involved?
I can follow that up if you like.
Because that surely would need to be in this year's budget, I reckon.
In the financial considerations here, it says the cost for membership is $4,000.
That's right, yeah.
All those right winners going to get
I'll take that on
Yes,
clarification.
can we just
Yeah.
clarify your thanks?
All right, so you're happy to skip forward again to 6.12, which is Audit and Governance Committee meeting? No questions? 6.13, determinations by the building surveyor. Councillor Wilson.
Oh no, it's the next one.
Okay, next one then, 6.14, Development Services. Councillor Wilson.
I noticed there was a delegate refused, and I was just wondering if...
So 99 First Avenue, that one?
Yes.
Hamilton
Subdivision.
112 Hamilton Street.
Oh, there's also a refusal on the next page as well.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering for those ones that were refused, if we could have an outline about the reasons why.
Thank you, through the Chair. In relation to the house at 112 Hamilton Street, the reasons for refusal primarily centred around insufficient open space, non-compliance with setbacks from side and rear boundaries, and non-compliance with front setback. With respect to the subdivision for First Avenue, the recommended reason for refusal centred around the insufficient site area for one of the two lots that was proposed.
Councillor Hamilton.
I note that there's delegated approval for several lots to extend the period of the validity, which I think is 35 Broadway, 23 Ida Street, 38 Scadden and 90 Anzac Terrace. Correct me if I'm wrong, but these are all unit developments, and I thought that extensions came back to council, but I remember one or two, but I'm just unsure of the process.
Thank you, through the chair. The approvals that were granted, those applications when they first were determined under delegated authority. They weren't applications that had gone through a council meeting determination in the first instance. If we were to refer an application to council, it would ordinarily be where the first decision had been made at a council meeting rather than under delegated authority.
Thank you.
Okay, so all of these have obviously exceeded their original 2-year planning approval, and they're seeking to extend their planning. So given the staff time involved in going back through these and issuing approvals again, do we get to charge them for that staff time or not?
Thank you, through the chair. The application is charged a fee that is prescribed under the town planning scheme regulations. It's very much a reduced fee for a revised application. It's a fee of $295 for those applications.
And I'm assuming that goes nowhere near covering staff costs to actually reconsider these applications when they come in.
Thank you, through the chair. The planning fees that we recoup don't cover staff costs, and that would be the case for these applications as well as applications in general.
I do have another question, but I'm not sure of, I don't have enough knowledge, so I'm going to ask you here. Given the changes, like there's one here, 23 Ida Street, which is amended application for 14 multiple dwellings to extend period of validity of approval. Now, given the changes in the design codes for apartments, if that application to extend was denied, would they not be required now to come up with better design or not?
Thank you, through the chair. If the application had been refused and an application for review had been made to SAT, the application would have been determined at SAT based on the planning framework that was in place at the time that the SAT review decision was being made.
Okay.
So these renewal applications were all determined prior to the 24th of May, so they were determined under the DR codes as they previously existed. If there had been refusals issued by the time that SAT got round to reviewing that decision and making its review decision, it's more than likely the case that Design WA would have been in place, and there may have been some changes to the planning framework that may have impacted what could have been approved. But that wasn't the case because the determinations were made prior to that changeover in the planning framework.
So can I just clarify, you're saying the determination's been the original approval or the approval to extend?
The approval to extend was also made under the previous planning framework.
Thanks. Thank you for enlightening me.
Okay, 6:15, implementation of council resolutions. Okay, notices of motion, so 7.71, which was Councillor Brown's notice of motion around Villiers Street. I'm just wondering if there was any additional information in this report compared to the previous report?
No. I did ask the officer, who's no longer with us, to follow up with the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage to provide a definitive position. It seemed like there was a sort of a tic-tacking of emails, but nothing really substantive for us to go on.
Is there any chance, I know it's only a week, between now and next week to try and get that, because the whole point of deferring this for a month was to get that clarity? Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I've got some concerns about the report, the author of the report. For example, on page 57, last paragraph, on 22nd May 2019, it says an email was provided, and there's no copy of that on the attachments. It's attachment, it says here attachment 10, which in fact it's attachment 11 in the list of attachments. But there's no reference, there's a reference to it.
So you'd like
It's
a copy
obviously
of
a
the
very
email?
important document,
Yep.
but it's not contained in there. So this looks like a sort of a out the door,
Yeah,
and that's all it is. So, but I'll still be seeking in principle agreement. In principle agreement is not a legally binding contract. It's a stepping stone to an agreement. It is not legally binding. So everybody knows it's a good idea. It's just a matter of getting it in principle agreement, and then that stepping stone is one of 3 that we can take.
Okay. So our CEO has said that she'll follow up on that this week. So 7.2 is Councillor Wilson's notice of motion about FOGO.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's not clear whose officer comment it is, so I'm not sure as to whether
Yeah, the officer's no longer with us.
in light of that, is the officer comment going to be reconsidered between now and the OCM, or is this comment going to stand as it currently is?
I can review that, Councillor Wilson, given I guess some recent developments.
Yes.
Are you standing because you have another question?
I do. Probably more flagging for a question on notice to perhaps be included in an updated officer comment. In the third paragraph, it says if an additional bin is required by a ratepayer and they are prepared to pay for an additional bin, it will be included in the rollout procedures. Is that in relation to the provision of additional bins under the existing system, or under what is being proposed?
I understand it was what is being proposed.
And where is that being proposed, and when do we get to see that?
I think it was part of the new regime, the new program that was going to be rolled out.
The staff proposal for a regime for council to consider and approve?
Yes.
And is it likely that that is going to come up in the near future?
Yes, I was going to propose that we have a workshop in July to rethink where we're at with FOGO, given recent developments and information received from the EMRC over the last couple of days.
Is it possible that, given the change in staff, that there might be a different approach or recommendation in response to the motion that
I think so. The 2 officers most heavily involved in FOGO, one has left the organisation and the other is unwell at the moment. I'm not sure when he is returning, but I'd be pleased to follow this up and review it in time for our next meeting.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so there's no confidential business. So that's the end of our briefing session in record speed. We'll lull Paul into a false sense of security. So thank you very much. Thank you to all the staff for being here. Thank you, Deanie.
Excuse me, John.
Paul, I'll approach the bench.